Hello everyone, welcome back to the podcast, and welcome to my channel, Easy English Learning. Today, I want to slow things down and talk from the heart. No interviews, no special effects, just me, my voice, and my personal experiences. I want to share stories about my childhood, my travels, and the challenges that shaped who I am today. If you're listening while walking, driving, or lying on your bed at night, I hope this episode feels like a quiet conversation between friends. Let me start with my childhood. When I think about my childhood, the first thing that comes to my mind is simplicity. Life was not easy, but it was simple. I grew up in a place where people knew each other, where neighbors felt like family, and where happiness didn't come from money or technology, but from moments. I remember waking up early in the morning, hearing the sounds of birds, motorcycles passing by, and sometimes my parents already busy with their work. There was no smartphone to check, no social media to scroll. Just the day waiting for us. As a child, I didn't understand struggle the way I do now. I didn't know what stress meant. I didn't think about the future, career, or success. My biggest problems were things like losing a pen at school, being late to class, or getting scolded for not doing homework. But even those small problems felt big at the time. Looking back, I realize how innocent that stage of life was. School played a huge role in shaping me. I wasn't the smartest student, and I wasn't the worst either. I was somewhere in the middle, trying to understand lessons, sometimes confused, sometimes motivated. There were days I loved learning, and days I felt completely lost. I remember being afraid to speak up in class because I didn't want to make mistakes. That fear of being judged stayed with me for a long time. At home, my family taught me lessons that no textbook ever could. They taught me respect, patience, and responsibility. Sometimes, those lessons came through kind words, and sometimes through strict discipline. At the time, I didn't always understand why things had to be so hard. But now, I see that those experiences built my character. One thing I remember clearly is how dreams start early. As a child, I had many dreams. Some days I wanted to be a teacher, other days a businessman, and sometimes I didn't even know what I wanted to be. I just knew I wanted a better life, not only for myself, but for my family too. Even without knowing the exact path, that desire was already there. As I grew older, life slowly became more complicated. Responsibilities increased. Expectations increased. Mistakes became more serious. And that's when challenges really started to appear. One of the biggest challenges in my life has been self-doubt. Doubting my abilities. Doubting my decisions. Doubting whether I was good enough. There were moments when I compared myself to others and felt left behind. I saw people my age achieving things faster, doing better, and moving forward confidently. Meanwhile, I felt like I was walking slowly, sometimes even standing still. There were times I failed. Times when plans didn't work out. Times when I put in effort, but didn't see results. Failure is a heavy word, but it's also a powerful teacher. At first, failure feels embarrassing. It hurts your pride. It makes you question yourself. But over time, you realize that failure is not the end. It's information. It tells you what doesn't work and pushes you to adjust. One challenge that changed me deeply was stepping out of my comfort zone. And that brings me to travel. Travel, for me, is not just about visiting new places. It's about learning. It's about perspective. The first time I traveled away from my familiar environment, I felt excited and scared at the same time. Excited because everything was new. Scared because nothing was familiar. When you travel, you realize how big the world is. You meet people with different backgrounds, different habits, different ways of thinking. Some people speak differently, eat differently, live differently. And suddenly, you understand that your way is not the only way. That realization humbles you. I remember standing in a new place, looking around, and feeling small. But not in a bad way. In a way that made me curious. Curious about life. Curious about stories. Curious about myself. Travel taught me independence. When you're far from home, you learn to rely on yourself. You learn to solve problems on your own. You learn to manage time, money, and emotions. Even small things, like getting lost or misunderstanding directions, become lessons. One experience during my travels taught me patience. There was a moment when things didn't go as planned. Transportation was delayed. Plans were canceled. I felt frustrated and tired. But I had no choice but to wait. And while waiting, I observed people around me. Some were calm. Some were angry. Some were smiling, despite the inconvenience. That moment made me realize that we can't always control situations, but we can control our reactions. Travel also helped me reflect on my childhood. Being away from home made me appreciate where I came from. I missed the familiar food, the language, the small routines I used to ignore. I realized that home is not just a place. It's a feeling. As much as travel brings joy, it also brings challenges. Loneliness is one of them. There are moments when you wish you could share an experience with someone familiar. Moments when you want to talk in your own language without thinking. Moments when you miss simple comfort. Those moments taught me emotional strength. They taught me how to sit with my thoughts, how to listen to myself, how to grow comfortable with silence. Another big challenge in my life has been consistency. Starting something is easy. Continuing is hard. There were many times I started projects, goals, or habits with strong motivation. But after some time, motivation faded. That's when discipline became important. I learned that motivation comes and goes. But discipline is what keeps you moving when you don't feel like it. This lesson didn't come overnight. It came from repeated failures, restarts, and self-reflection. Looking back at my childhood, I see how curiosity shaped me. Looking at my travels, I see how exposure shaped me. Looking at my challenges, I see how struggle shaped me. Every experience added a layer to who I am today. There were times I wanted to give up. Times I felt tired of trying. Times I questioned whether the effort was worth it. But each time, something small kept me going. Sometimes it was a supportive word. Sometimes it was a memory of where I started. Sometimes it was simply the refusal to quit. I want to say something important here. Challenges don't disappear when you grow older. They just change. Childhood challenges are different from adult challenges. But the feeling of uncertainty remains. The difference is how you handle it. Today, I try to see challenges as part of the journey, not obstacles blocking the road. I try to remind myself that growth often feels uncomfortable. If everything feels easy, you're probably not growing. When I look at my life now, I don't see a perfect story. I see a real one. With mistakes. With delays. With lessons learned the hard way. And honestly, I'm grateful for that. If my life had been easy, I might not have developed resilience. If I had never traveled, I might have stayed in a small mindset. If I had never struggled, I might not appreciate progress. To anyone listening who feels lost, behind, or uncertain, I want you to know this. Your experiences matter. Your story matters. Even the painful parts. You don't need to have everything figured out. You don't need to move at the same speed as others. Life is not a race. It's a journey of learning, unlearning, and becoming. Sometimes growth looks like success. Sometimes it looks like rest. Sometimes it looks like starting again. As I reflect on my childhood, my travels, and my challenges, I realize one thing clearly. Every phase of life prepares you for the next one, even when it doesn't make sense at the time. So if you're in a difficult season right now, be patient with yourself. If you're remembering your childhood with mixed emotions, honor those feelings. If you're dreaming about travel or change, don't ignore that voice inside you. Thank you for spending this time with me. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope something in this episode made you reflect on your own journey. Until next time, take care of yourself, keep learning, keep moving, and trust the process.